So you think that even though they have been saying that about him for weeks, that is not penetrating, and Americans
Actually,
are just misled, and that's why they don't like how Trump has handled this?
He has been saying that for weeks. And what has the entirety of the national news media been saying? He's a Maryland man. He's a mild-mannered suburban father. We have lied our rear ends off about this case.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Last night's episode of Newsnight with Abby Phillip was the kind of broadcast that practically writes its own headlines. It wasn't just lively, it was combustible. Right at the center of the storm, Scott Jennings. And if you know anything about Scott, you know he doesn't play patty cake with the facts. The topic? A judge accused of helping an undocumented immigrant slip through the cracks. While the rest of the panel seemed to tiptoe around the implications, offering soft takes and sympathetic framing, Scott didn't flinch. He stood firm, laser-focused on one thing: the law. It wasn't about scoring points. It was about holding the line when no one else seemed willing to. What followed was equal parts enlightening and exhausting. A panel of pundits more interested in defending political allies than dealing with the blatant reality staring them in the face. Scott came with facts. The others? Well, let's just say their gymnastics would make an Olympic coach jealous. So buckle in, because this wasn't just a debate. It was a battle over the soul of accountability. And Jennings wasn't about to let it slide. The truth was in the room, and Scott made sure no one could ignore it. This is where the spin met the wall, and reality hit back. Let's get into it.
The thing that bothers me about the Justice Department in this case is they made it into a show. They waited a whole week to paper this case. A week. And here's what I want to say. You have the right to get an arrest warrant, and you have the right to get a summons. And that they got an arrest warrant for a judge shows that they wanted to make this a spectacle. Last point I want to make is, I presented to a grand jury and indicted a state prosecutor. I indicted a prosecutor. And I got a summons because I didn't want to make a spectacle. They made a spectacle of this case.
Well, and they announced it on X as well, and then deleted it, but announced it on X.
Why wouldn't you want to make a spectacle of it? I mean, the fact of the matter is, there are liberal Democrat elected officials, not all judges, some are mayors and others, all over this country who have said repeatedly since Donald Trump became the president that they would like to obstruct his principles and his program when it comes to deporting illegal immigrants. Here you have this person. If these facts are proven true, obviously that's exactly what she was trying to do here. Why wouldn't you want to
Let me respond to that.
Well, let me. Why? Because
you asked me a question. Let me respond.
Well, let me tell you my view. The spectacle is important because a message has to be sent to everybody else. We're not going to put up. You've been elected by people to uphold the law, and some of the laws that have been most flagrantly violated in this country are immigration laws. You've got to get on board with upholding all the laws, not just
Let me
the ones you
respond,
like.
Scott.
I'll let you respond, and then you can get on.
Back to your point on the Justice Department and the FBI director's role and the Attorney General's role. It is not the Attorney General's role or the FBI director's role to put political points on the board. That is not what their role is. And I think that what's happening, not only with this case, but what you've seen on attacks on the judiciary, the reason that there is such an outcry is, yes, it's shocking that they arrested a judge, but what's even more shocking is this is part of a pattern of attacking judges. And they're going, they have been attacking judges left and right. And Scott, you know this. They've been attacking judges left and right. Hold on, but I will say, and they're going to use this case as proof that everybody is against the president. They're going to use this example to attack every judge. This is what Donald Trump does. He attacks everybody who disagrees with him, and that is a dangerous place to be.
Every judge that harbors fugitives is going to be targeted.
Hold on. That's why when I started this conversation, I do think that it's easy to say that she was harboring a fugitive, but I think that it's also fair that even based on what the government is alleging here, that's not crystal clear. And I think that's the first part of it, because there might be a case where perhaps a judge is actually saying, go out that back door and make sure they don't see you and, get out. But that's not really what happened here. And on top of that, look, I think that Sochi's point about the judges being part of the political game here is important. If it were happening in a vacuum, that would be one thing. But this is an administration that has attack judges, and they don't think that judges have a role in immigration enforcement.
I'm not the political genius on this panel, okay, but I can tell you this. This happened on April 18th. They wait until today, okay? Mr. Trump, President Trump, had a really bad week. And to
This is
me, Scott, this is a shiny object. Wave it over here. They have this big press
Look,
conference, and I'm
honestly-
going to focus on this. When Kash Patel issued that X and called it a perp, called him a perp, and said we believe, and then he took it down. We had Comey.
Well, they reissued it, did they not? So look, here's the reason.
Okay, Kash Patel is head of the FBI.
You said you had to.
It's an embarrassment.
Let me just respond to something.
Yeah,
you said,
go ahead.
Which is that you said, well, you got to worry about the impact on the community.
Yes.
The president and the Justice Department and his people have to worry about the impact of illegal immigration on the country because nobody's been worried about that for years. And the reason this is important is because this is one of Donald Trump's biggest criminal justice priorities. And frankly, it's one of the American people's biggest priorities to control this. And you know well, there are people all over towns, all over this country who have been working overtime to try to stop him from executing on this agenda. If she turns out to be one of them, a spectacle is warranted so other people will stop doing it.
I appreciate, Scott, you saying if she turns out to be one of them, because
She's
think
doing-
it
she's
is
doing
very
damn
much
work.
something that we will see what.
You know, it really just boggles the mind how predictably these media panels twist themselves into knots defending the indefensible. From the opening minute of the segment, Abby Phillip made it painfully clear she was less interested in the facts of the case and more concerned with crafting a redemption arc for the judge, an official who, let's not forget, is accused of actively undermining immigration enforcement. And this wasn't a maybe or possibly kind of situation. We're talking about a case involving a criminal alien allegedly tied to domestic abuse, a brutal, traumatic crime with real victims. Yet somehow the moral priority in that room became the judge's reputation, not the safety and justice owed to those victims. Let that sink in. Imagine you're one of those victims, already scarred, already terrified, and now you're told that the judge presiding over your case is more worried about protecting the accused from deportation than delivering justice on your behalf. That isn't just a lapse in judgment. It's a betrayal of everything the courtroom is supposed to stand for. It sends a chilling message that identity politics or ideological sympathies now outweigh the actual law. What kind of message does that send to victims everywhere? That their trauma can be ignored if it gets in the way of someone's activist agenda? And here's the kicker. It's not just this one incident. We're talking about a larger pattern of judicial activism that's rotting the foundation of our justice system. There are reports that this very judge even posted signs outside her courtroom advising undocumented immigrants to call in virtually if they feared ICE. Think about how insane that is. That's not neutrality. That's not protecting rights. That's advocacy from the bench. The courtroom should be the one place where facts rule and biases are left at the door. But when you're using your platform as a judge to offer strategic legal guidance to those violating immigration laws, you've already crossed the line from impartial to ideological. And I'll say this too. I'm not someone who usually celebrates political stunts or public takedowns. But in this case, making it a spectacle was absolutely the right move. Why? Because the quiet warnings have clearly failed. Too many public officials are testing the boundaries, assuming that nothing will happen when they stretch or outright break the law. This arrest needed to be loud. It needed to be visual. It needed to make every other would-be activist judge pause and ask, am I next? That's not cruelty, that's deterrence. That's the kind of enforcement that actually prevents further abuse of power. And through all of it, every excuse, every misdirection, Scott Jennings remained the only person at that table grounded in reality. While others played word games and acted shocked by the arrest, Scott pointed directly to the heart of the issue, the erosion of rule of law by people entrusted to uphold it. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't throw punches, he just calmly, persistently laid out the facts. And for that, you'd think he'd be applauded. But no, he was treated like the villain in a room that had already decided the real threat wasn't the judge breaking the law, but the man daring to talk about it. And you know what? That tells you everything you need to know about the state of political discourse right now. We're living in a world where telling the truth gets you vilified and hiding from it earns you applause. That's not journalism, that's theater. That's why this clip matters. Because when one man stands up for reason in a room full of spin, it deserves to be seen. Anyway, enough of the delusion. Let's get back to the video.
Because the how of it is starting to matter to Americans based on some of these numbers.
People don't like the chaos. And in the same New York Times Santa poll, one of the issues that Donald Trump is really under the water, probably his worst issue, is the Maryland man who is in El Salvador right now. It's something that...
Maryland man?
He is a Maryland man,
Come
but
on.
what I will tell
he
you
is an El Salvadoran citizen. He is
Okay.
not a Maryland man. He is an
But-
illegal immigrant living in this country illegally for 14
you
years.
can say whatever you want to say, Scott, but the American
This is
people.
why the
hold on,
polling is the
hold
way
on.
it is,
The
because we're lying. We're lying.
We're not lying. The American
Scott,
people.
the peace orders were in Maryland.
Guys,
He was beating his wife.
The American,
You know.
the American people are seeing chaos. They do not like it, and immigration might be something that is popular for Trump, and now he's going underwater. But this case specifically is one of his lowest points with the
Scott, so
American
you
people.
think
Is it
that
accurate to call this man a Maryland man?
Scott, let me-
Yes or no? Of
Scott,
course it's not.
You think that it's interesting to me that you think that despite the administration yelling far and wide that this guy is a gang-banging member of MS-13, despite, by the way, no evidence of that, you think that
Have you seen the knuckles?
You know that. Okay, let's.
It's also why he couldn't go
Scott,
back to El Salvador
Scott,
because of gang retaliation.
So you think that even though they have been saying that about him for weeks, that is not penetrating, and Americans
Actually,
are just
great question.
misled, and that's why they
Great
don't
question.
like how
Yes.
Trump has handled this?
He has been saying that for weeks.
You-
And what has the entirety of the national news media been saying? He's a Maryland man. He's a mild-mannered suburban father. We have lied our rear ends off about this case. He is a El Salvador illegal immigrant. He came to the country 14 years ago illegally. There is a ton of evidence that he is involved in gang activity. There is a ton of evidence that he was
is
involved
it-
in human trafficking.
I guess
Not
I'm
until that
asking you to
evidence is involving
consider.
Scott,
What
you
I'm
know-
asking you to consider is it possible
But
that
how
the
do we
American
describe it?
people understand that about the case, but they also think that Trump should follow the judge's orders?
Is it
not
possible? Is it
that
possible
that's
the American
case?
people have been misled by the media about the circumstances of this case? He did have due process. He is illegal. He
did
did
not
have a
have due
deportation.
process.
Then how did he go to
Okay.
He
court
was
so many
never
times?
indicted for being a member
he's
of
an
MS-13.
illegal
Listen,
alien.
Why doesn't Pam Bondi
The-
indict him then on that?
There's also a factor here. The judge made an order that
Exactly.
that she expects to be executed on, and it has not been. And that is the part that I think is salient to the American public about this case.
And here's the other thing. Judge Boasberg, the chief judge of D.C., what troubles me greatly, and it should trouble you too, being a DOJ guy, former, is that an order was issued in front of Judge Boasberg, and there is compelling evidence, Scott Jennings, that the DOJ, our former home, willfully violated court order of Chief Judge Boasberg. That offends me to no end. Forget the merits of whether he's a Maryland man or he's a MS-13.
How can I forget that? It's vital.
Well, you're talking about the merits of his case, good or bad, but what really offends me is the Department of Justice, where I worked for almost 30 years, willfully violated a court order, and they lied in court about their justification or their lack of knowledge. That should bother you more than anything else, my
Let me
friend.
really gotta
let me
go.
tell you what offends
We really
me.
gotta go.
Yeah,
Is
go ahead.
that there are people, political party in this country dedicated to re-importing illegal aliens hand over fist, and it is outrageous. That's what offends me.
That's great rhetoric, but it ain't
All
true.
right, we gotta leave it.
down in El
We
Salvador.
gotta leave it
Who's
there,
in El
guys.
Salvador?
Great
It's
rhetoric.
Democrats.
Gene Rossi, thank you very much. Jim Trust.
You know what absolutely no one on that panel is willing to admit? That the very judges being attacked by Trump are often the ones who started this whole mess. It's like we're all pretending this battle just randomly appeared one day. But it didn't. This didn't begin with Trump waking up one morning and deciding to wage war on the judiciary. No, this started when judges themselves chose sides and used their benches not to apply the law, but to bend it for ideological convenience. And yet, anytime someone like Trump pushes back, suddenly he's the villain in the story. Context matters. But these mainstream media panels act like historical amnesia is part of the job description. Let's just ask the hard question. What exactly is Trump supposed to do? Sit back quietly and let activist officials, including judges, completely derail his immigration policies? Is he supposed to nod along politely while they obstruct federal law and give safe haven to people who've broken it? Because if the president did that, he wouldn't just be passive, he'd be complicit. And that's not leadership, that's surrender. So when I hear these pundits clutch their pearls every time Trump makes a public example of someone clearly playing politics in a courtroom, I don't see a problem. I see accountability. And once again, it was Abby Phillip leading the charge, practically leaping to defend the judge under investigation. She looked straight at Scott Jennings, one of the only voices of reason on that panel, and basically said, "Well, I'm glad you said if she's guilty because we really don't know yet." Are you kidding me? After all the evidence, all the context, all the signs, we're still pretending we don't know which way the wind is blowing? Abby always seems to default to defending the person under investigation, as long as that person is politically convenient for her side. And this isn't new, it's a pattern, a consistent one. You could almost set your watch to it. And look, I know not everything is black and white, but at a certain point, facts are facts. You've got an undocumented immigrant involved in domestic violence, a judge allegedly aiding and avoiding deportation, and a media class bending over backwards to avoid calling any of it what it really is. Instead, they keep trying to paint this guy like he's some gentle suburban dad wrongfully persecuted by Trump. That's not just inaccurate. It's offensive to every law-abiding citizen who wants to believe the system still works for them. It's offensive to every victim whose abuser slipped through the cracks because someone in a robe decided their political views were more important than justice. The real question here is, how long are we going to tolerate this double standard? How long are we going to sit through media gymnastics designed to protect officials who knowingly undermine the law? Because, let's be real, this isn't about compassion, it's about control. Every time these people shield activist judges from consequences, they're chipping away at the integrity of our entire legal system. And don't even get me started on the Maryland man label. This individual is an undocumented immigrant tied to criminal behavior, and yet the media wants to paint him as a misunderstood neighbor. That's not just spin, it's manipulation. And here's where it gets truly alarming. If making a public spectacle is what it takes to finally shake the system awake, then so be it. Because the quiet approach clearly hasn't worked. It's time for bold, unapologetic enforcement. If you hold a public office and you betray that responsibility for personal or ideological gain, you should be exposed, loudly, visibly. No one should get a pass just because their politics align with the press. Scott Jennings wasn't angry, he was focused, clear. He didn't call names, he called out hypocrisy, and for that he was practically treated like an intruder on that panel. But maybe that's exactly why his voice mattered most. Because while everyone else was playing optics, he was the only one demanding substance. That's rare, and it's needed now more than ever. So the bottom line is this. We're not in a crisis because someone blew the whistle. We're in a crisis because too many people in power believe they'll never be held accountable. That's why this video matters. Because when someone finally says the quiet part out loud, when they call out the rot hiding behind the robe, it forces the rest of us to pay attention. Anyway, that's it from me. What do you think? Was Trump right to turn this case into a spectacle, or do you think the outrage is justified? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And hey, if you got something out of this, give the video a like and hit subscribe. Every bit helps push back against the noise. You're watching The Common Thread. Thanks for tuning in.